At Wabash, there is one code of conduct. It's the gentleman's rule. And up here, it's just words on a screen. It's worthless without action. So what does it look like to conduct yourself as a gentleman? Right? What does it take to be considered a responsible citizen? Well, no matter how you answer those questions, one thing is certain. Those qualities are defined relative to other people. In other words, it's not gentlemanly to open a door for no one at all, and you can't be a responsible citizen unless you're a member of a society. Look, my point is, nothing happens in a vacuum. We need others in order to be gentlemen and responsible citizens. We have to co-create value together. So this concept of value co-creation is at the heart of what is called service-dominant logic. And in the service-dominant logic perspective, value is co-created when two actors in a system discover that they can mutually benefit through exchanging with one another, meaning when they can be of service to each other. And an actor doesn't mean a film or a stage actor. An actor is an entity. It's an individual, a brand, or a company. It's one who performs an action. And each actor has a competence. It's something valuable to society that they have specialized in to the detriment of other competences that they did not specialize in. So to access those resources, we must rely on others who have specialized in those competencies. So nothing happens without cooperation between members of the community or the network. So let me go back in time for just a second. For much of my career, I was seeking an answer to a question, which is, what makes some individuals and companies successful while others are not so successful, even if they have great products and services? So I'm the son of a marketer and an entrepreneur, and I've been in sales since I can talk. And at every company I worked for, I was typically the youngest, I had the least amount of experience, but I was generally the top salesperson. And I didn't feel like I was doing anything different than the next guy, so why was I having success? Well, it wasn't until about 20 years into my career that I started to figure it out. And that's when I met my fiancée, Carrie Wheatus. She actually introduced me to this concept. So a few years ago, Carrie was finishing her master's degree in counseling, and she was working on a thesis with service-dominant logic and value co-creation at its core. She was looking into what makes psychotherapy successful. And I didn't know this, but there are over 600 different approaches to psychotherapy. Think of them as brands of therapy. And in this crowded marketplace, they've all developed these bells and whistles trying to outdo each other and prove that they're the best way to do therapy, which is exactly what companies do, right? But research actually suggests that all of these brands of therapy are no better or worse. They're all equally successful. So it's not the specific brand of therapy, the specific bells and whistles that makes therapy work. What is it? Well, it turns out that one of the strongest correlations of successful therapy is what's called the therapeutic alliance, which is the relationship that is built between the therapist and the client. It seems like value of therapy actually lives in that interaction. The value is co-created between the therapist and the client, no matter what brand of therapy is going on. This was a light bulb moment for me. I said to Carrie, I said, wait a second, this totally applies to the business world. I mean, is it possible that brands had such success because they were just focusing on the relationship instead of just making the sale, on co-creating value with their consumers over short-term transactions? See, that's how they taught us. These old sales leaders that I grew up learning from, they grew up in the 80s and 90s, they looked at customers like lions stalking a prey. They always said, ABC, always be closing. If you ever seen the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, there's a great scene that showcases this exact thing. So companies that are using this traditional sales and marketing techniques, they are stuck in an old model of trying to create a better mousetrap or win the race to the bottom and convince customers of their value. But this is a finite mindset. So as a student and a practitioner of marketing and armed with this new knowledge, I started seeing this trend in the business world. You know, it's kind of like if you're ever looking for a car to buy, all of a sudden you start seeing that exact car out on the road all the time. That's what I was seeing. So I was observing these successful brands thriving because they were authentically connecting with their customers instead of trying to push and shoehorn products into them. So the reason I had success in my career was not that I was slick or I was trained in the art of the sale or something. In fact, I didn't have to convince my customers of anything because I was working with them and not against them. So for value co-creation to happen, there must be a relationship, a genuine collaboration between actors that is based on trust. And this mindset thinks of customers as co-creators of value and that they believe that they bring more than just their money to business transactions. So this is a customer-centric perspective. And adopting a service-dominant mindset approach helps businesses focus on the consumer and their needs rather than just on selling the product. See, in service-dominant logic, nothing has intrinsic value. Instead, value is something that is defined at the point of exchange. So for example, if I have something to sell, it's really only worth what someone else will pay for it, right? Which varies by person, by context, et cetera. And that's because the value is different depending on the person, even if somebody's buying something with the same amount of dollars for the service. So my company, Capturely, we provide headshots to business professionals to represent them in the digital world. And for each headshot, we charge $100. Okay? So the package that they purchase costs the same amount of money, but for each client, the real value is unique. For one, it may be redefining their identity after a career pivot. For someone else, it may be getting a professional LinkedIn photo that gives them the confidence that they need to email that hiring manager at their dream job. And for someone else, getting a headshot might just be an annoyance. And the real value we can provide them is just doing it faster and less expensive than some other photographer. So each headshot costs $100, but for these three customers, the real value is uniquely determined between my company and each individual consumer. So today, consumers are seen as collaborators, and successful brands are using value co-creation as a competitive strategy. So more modern, agile companies are focusing on the long-term goal of customer relationships. And a relationship begins when a consumer becomes aware of your brand. So the brand needs to live in the community that it wants to serve. This means your brand needs to be everywhere, it needs to be consistent, and it needs to be good. So companies can no longer just turn out products they want to sell and convince people to buy. They need to engage in communities to understand what people want to buy. There have been some powerful brands that have made this value co-creation part of their DNA. So Harley-Davidson, for example, they have a rich culture of devoted fans, even if they don't own a Harley. So you don't have to own a product from a brand in order to be a member of that community. Take Rolls-Royce, for example. Made right here in Indiana, these cars are only accessible to the ultra-wealthy. They're a symbol of success and class. But a car, it's just 4 wheels and an engine that gets us from A to B, right? A motorcycle does the same thing on 2 wheels. But then why is Harley-Davidson and Rolls-Royce, why have those brands stood the test of time? Because we as a society have all agreed upon what it means to be a fan, a follower, or a member of the community that supports those brands. It is deep within the brand culture. I'll never own a Rolls-Royce. It's fine. But if someone tells me they do, I immediately infer a number of things about them, right? That's because brand is part of their identity. It is a shortcut to allowing others to understand a piece of who they are. Brand equity is the value that is derived from consumer perception of the brand name rather than from the product or the brand itself. So today's brands are escaping product-centered thinking and instead focusing on experience that consumers want to co-create with them. And in addition, consumers are actually turning to each other. So from word of mouth to online review sites like Yelp to recommendations from trusted influencers. Right? This is why brands pay for influencer marketing. And your last name does not have to be Kardashian or Jenner. Actually, micro-influencers have a smaller reach, but they have much more of an engaged audience. And when you have an engaged audience, that tells you that value is being co-created. Think about it this way. When you like a brand online or you share a post, you're actually contributing to the value co-creation. See, today we live in a networked world of interdependence. Service-dominant logic describes this vast network where every person, company, brand, or organization is an actor in the network. And communities are just smaller parts of this vast network. And trust must be earned because we have to trust those with whom we exchange resources. We are all embedded in many communities. And these can be real-world or virtual communities, from families to sports teams, clubs, extending online to Facebook groups, LinkedIn connections, and so on. Even music platforms like Spotify build communities worldwide of people who are listening to the same genre of music. Spotify itself is actually co-creating value by generating customized playlists for each one of us and allowing users to share together on the platform. You may be familiar with this guy right here. This is Gary Vaynerchuk, aka Gary V. Some may consider him polarizing, but he is nothing if not authentic. And in addition to dropping a ton of F-bombs, he's perhaps the most well-known advocate of value co-creation, even though he doesn't call it that. He has this vast, loyal community, and he creates a tremendous amount of content around this philosophy of giving value, knowing that you'll eventually have an ask. Because remember, there must be mutual benefit in order to co-create value. So Gary's been preaching this philosophy for decades, and in this 2013 book that he wrote called Jab, 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 Right Hook, the jabs are the value that you give your customers over and over again, and the right hook is the ask. He never uses the term service-dominant logic, but it's the philosophy that he's preaching. We are only going to become more and more networked in the future, and communities will only become stronger as Web3 enables individuals connect directly with each other instead of living in groups that are governed by Web2 giants like Facebook, now Meta. So blockchain is changing the way that we transact by verifying the authenticity of everything, giving everyone a faster, safer way to validate key information and establish trust. And a decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO, it's an emerging form of structure that has no central governing body and whose members share a common goal to act in the best interest of the community. And an ability to show up authentically will only become more important as we move into Web3 and the metaverse. There's almost no better example than this right here. Have you guys heard about this bag? This is actually a Gucci bag that sold on Roblox for over $4,000, which is more than what it costs in real life. So for those of us over 30, Roblox is a gaming platform that is defining the metaverse. I had to look it up too. So a Roblox user actually purchased this for a bag, this bag for an avatar on their platform. It's a digital representation of a Gucci purse. So just like the gentleman's rule on the screen, it's just a correlation of pixels. But real value was co-created between Gucci and Roblox users. Because Gucci has developed a rich brand identity over decades, and users in the metaverse, they want to use that brand identity to define their own avatars. In the same way that real-life customers use Gucci, Harley-Davidson, and Rolls-Royce to broadcast something about who they are. See, value co-creation drives engagement, growth, innovation, and community now and into the future. In this time that we're living in, it's called the experience economy, the reputation economy, the information economy. All of these words have elements of value co-creation and service-dominant logic. I mentioned this earlier, but value means different things to different people, right? And when I left Wabash to pursue an acting career in Los Angeles, I thought the entertainment industry would tell me what my value was. I mean, it's a well-established industry, so clearly those who have made it would know much better than I would, right? But there were a million guys in LA who looked like me. They were 18 to 25, blonde hair, blue-eyed. I was trying to be all of them. I spent years trying to mold myself into what I thought the industry wanted from me, but I was having no success. I was being told that I had no value. So even though I was succeeding over here in sales, I only saw my value as it related to money. The more money I had, the more valuable I was. So when I went broke at 35 and I had to sell my condo in order to pay my bills, I was depressed. I did not want to see my friends and family because I was ashamed. I had great relationships, but it was the relationship with myself that was broken because I was tying it to something fleeting. It took me 20 years to find out where my value lied. And it was in me the whole time. I took this screenshot with my phone a few weeks ago, these two notifications. These people were sent the same exact sales message from me on LinkedIn. We were introducing this new virtual headshot service that we have. Shameless plug. But these two replied about 20 minutes from each other, and one was interested in co-creating value, and the other wasn't. I used to allow myself to be controlled by that bottom message. Now I find happiness in the top one. So look, we are all consumers. We are all parts of networks. We are all shaping the way that brands engage with us. And this shift away from the old way of thinking, interacting, and selling, it's already happened. We just have to change our perspective along with it. So we have the power to create, engage, and support brands that we believe in, to create experiences, to build our own brand identity, our own brand equity. And when we take a customer-centric approach, we actually give ourselves the opportunity to focus on the long game. Because your life is just getting started. Even mine at 43. So seek out companies that are interested in co-creating value, or start your own. Join communities, build networks, get comfortable talking about your ideas, your dreams, your interests, because your ideas have merit. These conversations establish authentic connections that create visibility, that ultimately create opportunity.